Welcome to the TELUS Originals DocTalks, a series of talks dedicated to craft, themes, and ideas behind TELUS Originals documentaries with the people behind and in front of the camera. I'm your host, Sabrina Rani Furminger, and for this episode, we'll be talking to filmmaker Ali Grant about Not Quite That. Not Quite That tells the story of Sarah White. After learning that she carries a genetic mutation predisposing her to breast cancer, Sarah has a big decision to make. Should she wait and see what happens? Or should she act fast and have a preventative double mastectomy? Whatever she decides will potentially impact how she sees herself and how the world sees her. And in order to make that decision, Sarah turns to a brain trust of close family and friends. Not that Sarah is too concerned about how the world sees her. As a Jewish woman, a mother, and a butch lesbian, Sarah is no stranger to the confused judgments of others. But would life without breasts make everything even more perplexing? With the support of her friends and family, Sarah grapples with what it means to be seen by the world and by herself, as a person finding peace amidst change and nuance. Not Quite That comes to us courtesy of Ali Grant. Ali is a lesbian filmmaker based right here in Vancouver. At age 53, she went back to school to learn documentary filmmaking. Ali's passion is telling stories about the extraordinary lives of ordinary women. Her documentaries have shown in festivals nationally and internationally, including the Uppsala Short Film Festival, the Vancouver International Film Festival, Toronto's Inside Out LGBT Film Festival, Doxa Documentary Film Festival, and the Women Over 50 Film Festival. She's received funding from TELUS, Creative BC, and TELUS Originals, has awards from the Canada Council for the Arts and the BC Arts Council, a PhD in Geography from McMaster University, and a certificate in documentary film production from Langara College. Ali is a member of the International Documentary Association, the Documentary Organization of Canada, and the Gender Equity in Media Society Vancouver, and is the founder of On the Creek Films. Today, we'll speak with Ali about her remarkable adventures in filmmaking and the hows and whys of Not Quite That. Ali Grant, welcome to TELUS Originals DocTalks.
Hi, Sabrina. Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed that introduction. It did make me think of the thrills and spills of the last few years for sure.
There's a lot to talk about today, so let's just get right into Not Quite That. Tell me about your introduction to Sarah. How did you meet, and what struck you the most about her during that first meeting?
Well, it's interesting because we already knew each other. So we were friends over the last few years. And so how the film actually started, or the idea for the film, was that we were out for coffee, catching up, out for coffee with our partners. And I had just finished that program at Langara. And so I was telling them about that. And Sarah had just been to see a breast cancer specialist the day before. So, of course, she was telling us about that. And she leaned in and she said, it's just one more thing where I'm not quite that. And I said, well, what do you mean not quite that? She said, well, I'm Jewish, but I'm not very Jewish. And, I'm a woman, but people mistake me for a man. And I'm lesbian, but people often think I'm trans. And I'm a mother, but I didn't carry the boys. And now here I am seeing a breast cancer surgeon or specialist, but I don't have breast cancer yet. And I thought, oh my God, like the complexity that is contained just in that one sentence. I thought, these are the kind of stories that I want to tell. And so, I said to her, let's make a film about this. This could be my first documentary. And then we can tell you the rest after that, from where it went from there.
I love that.
That was that initial meeting.
That's amazing. I love that in the course of one sentence, she gives you like the plan for your film and also the title of your film. That is incredible. So, you were struck in that moment, inspiration, that you could tell Sarah's story in documentary form. What kind of conversations, though, did you have with Sarah in order to get her on board? Did she require any kind of convincing at all? Yeah, so let's hear about those conversations.
Yeah, I think very much so. I mean, I think that, and she will say that now, that in the beginning, I mean, actually, when I said, let's do this, I joke that she said, yeah, that's a great idea, let's do it. But really, that was Tamara, her partner, who was also there, who thought it was a fabulous idea. Sarah, on the other hand, did not. Thought, she didn't want to be in the spotlight. She also had concerns that, her story wasn't important enough or wasn't, worth sharing. And so in the beginning, I think that she said yes initially. She said, look, I'll let you practice, like as a new filmmaker, you're a friend, okay, bring your camera, we can see where this goes. And so I think that she didn't really expect that it would become a film, and I wasn't sure either. And so, but as we went along, I think that the conversations, as it became more serious, that there might actually be a documentary, I think the conversations were very much about trust between us, ethics of documentary filmmaking. I was really clear with her that her friendship was more important to me than the film was. Like, that was so important, and that we would talk at every step. If at some point she decided that she didn't want to do this, then we wouldn't do it. That became a little more complicated when TELUS Originals came on board. And we had to have a conversation about, there's other people involved now, there's support for this film. Let's talk about moving forward with this. And again, it was really all about assurances that we would talk about the film and what it was going to look like. We would talk about parts of her story that she wanted to share or didn't share. We could go back to that. So it was, and certainly at film school, I had heard that a big part of being a director is like relationship. It's so important, the relationship with the people who are in your documentaries. And that was true. That was a very big part of the process.
Yeah, it sounds like what you're describing is a collaboration, whereas you're just standing there with your camera, training it on somebody. It sounds like. And so were you talking the whole time, having conversations, and was Sarah sitting in on, I don't know, editing, or you did like dailies or reviewing footage or storyboarding or, all of that kind of stuff?
She wasn't sitting in on editing at all. But I had said that we would have a look at the first, the rough cut, we'd look at the fine cut, and we did all those things. But also the filming took place over 4 years. And there was a pandemic in there, the lockdown, all of that kind of thing. And so Sarah and I would fairly regularly, when we could, we'd go for walks. We'd walk on the seawall and down at Paul Street here and talk about, what was going on, what was coming up for her. Because it was a story that was, it was unfolding. Probably, I did an interview with her fairly early on to really get into the story of what had led her in her life to the questions that she was really grappling with now. And so, she also changed. She changed the things she was thinking about over the time of the documentary as well, so of the filming. So that's really what we were doing. And, in terms of collaboration, we disagreed, right? And we continued to have those conversations. And if there was something that, I really, really absolutely thought needed to be in the film, I explained why, and we would talk through those things. So it was a fascinating process. I learned so much.
It was 4 years then between your initial conversation about sitting out there for coffee the day after graduating, and then, the final day of filming, I guess. So where in there then did Sarah's surgery fall? Was that like towards the end of the 4 years?
No, so I know in the beginning, and I think maybe this came from somebody who wrote it up in this particular way, the question of whether Sarah would have the preventative double mastectomy was never a question. The question was more, okay, would she have reconstruction, or also how would it complicate her life being out in the world? I'm already getting a hard time from people for, they're mistaking it for a man, or, and would it make a difference then if she no longer had the breasts? And so, she also had an oophorectomy. So anybody, there's more information for anybody who has the BRCA mutation. She was very much at risk of ovarian cancer also. So there was a lot of discussion over the first year when we were filming, including with her friends, just the bigger question of, for women, what's our relationship with our breasts, and what would we do if we were in this situation, and so on. So there was a lot of discussion, and then Sarah had the surgery about a year after that discussion. And it was just a couple of weeks before the lockdown. Right. So that really had a bit of an impact on also the filming, because I was imagining that after the surgery, there would be this next phase of Sarah coming out into the world, right? So being public with this new body, with this new presentation, what would it all mean? And nobody was going anywhere.
Yeah.
So, that meant that some filming was really delayed, and the story evolved as it evolved in kind of different directions. It was fascinating. So I think that maybe I said the filming was over 4 years, maybe the filming was over 3 years, and then of course, you have all the post-production, et cetera, et cetera.
Wow, what a journey. You mentioned the conversations, and I think there's a lot to love about your film. Sarah as an individual, the community, around her, the questions that are brought up, even in my own mind, thinking about this stuff. But I think my most favorite moments were those moments where Sarah was in conversation with, I called them a brain trust, because that's really what it kind of felt like, with friends and also with family. And I loved the act of, sitting around and talking about our relationship with breasts, and it was very vulnerable and very intimate. What did you as a filmmaker do to create an environment where people felt comfortable, enough to speak so openly? Because, you bring a camera out, and, that can cause people to go, oop.
Yeah. Sabrina, you're not the only one. Like, I have been quite fascinated, struck by the number of people who've watched the film, and we've had some great Q&As as it's been on its lovely festival run. And so many people have brought up that conversation in the film, where we've got, I think there were 12 of us. I was behind the camera, but so, 11 lesbians sitting around a table, having a conversation about how they feel about their breasts and what they would do, and history, their change in presentation over life, and so on. And so because that was so early on, that was a few weeks after that first conversation that I had with Sarah, and we decided to try this. Because it was so early on, it was just me and my camera and sound equipment. And I think, and all of those women, I was part of that group, I was part of that community. And so I think that there was already that trust there. And I think there was a lot of love. There was a lot of love for Sarah. And so therefore, women were willing to have that conversation and also have it on camera. And it really amazed me. I didn't know that it was going to go as it did, because, we had dinner, and then, some jokes about, why we were there, what the conversation was. And, I imagined that it would be a conversation at the table back and forth between people. But what happened is, I think Sarah simply asked the question, and then it went round the table, one after one after one. And that hadn't been it hadn't been planned really at all. And that was amazing because every single woman was given the chance to talk and be listened to completely by the other women at the table. I think it really affected things. And then it allowed everyone to really be incredibly authentic during that conversation. And it was amazing. And I think that, I feel like they just forgot. They didn't forget I was there, but it was only me and my wee camera and handheld and, getting in there. And, these are some of the kind of conversations probably that I might have had with them in the past in terms of being that vulnerable, like being that authentic. And so there was some comfort there. But it was very gratifying. It's been very gratifying, I think, that people have really felt that they were invited into that conversation, like, people who've watched it. Yeah. Really invited into that conversation as well as the one with their sons.
Oh, that was also very beautiful. Yeah. I mean, I think one, I love that you said there are 11 around the table and then you, so literally a jury. Sitting there debating that. But, it was also like, for me, it was a nice reminder of the power of the communities that we build for ourselves, and that the best kind of communities are the ones where we can sit there, in indecision or discomfort or whatever, and then share ourselves, so it's, as I said up top, there's a lot in your film. And so that also made me want to be like, I got to take more stuff to my own jury of women in my life, because there's so much to be gained, from sharing that. What were some of your favorite filming days?
I think, some of them truthfully were things that didn't end up in the film.
Too much fun.
Too much fun, I did go and move in with Sarah and Tamara for 4 days, just myself again. And just to pick up, to pick up some Verity, to be there. We obviously, we had a lot of fun. That was quite wonderful. And then perhaps and you will remember this from seeing the film, the Butch photo shoot. So that was so much
amazing
fun.
Yeah.
In that case, we had a crew. But just one, it was an all women or non-binary, etc. crew. Same with the photographer. And so everybody was really comfortable. It was a lot of fun. And it was amazing to watch the 3 women get photographed, to be enjoying that. And I remember afterwards, I think, and one of them is my partner, Lara, who's in the film quite a bit. And so, I think she said that they were discussing it afterwards and just saying, they'd be the last women who'd be invited to a photo shoot. And so it was great. It was great being able to watch that, And then maybe also, I just loved the conversation that Sarah and Tamara had with their sons, Ira and Max.
Yeah.
Again, we had the same crew. It was over the same time. And so I was able just to, watch on the monitor and but I often forgot to watch because I was just so drawn into the conversation that they were having and couldn't believe that they were having this conversation because, again, it wasn't set up. I mean, of course, we set them up where they were sitting, etc. But Sarah just asked the question and then they took off. And it was just amazing.
Yeah, they are just a remarkable family as well. I feel like I've used that word quite a few times, but that's like, I'll find a different word. Phenomenal. They're a phenomenal family. But can you tell me what it was then when you were sitting there, just with your jaw dropped watching the conversation? What was it in the conversation that they were having, that was so moving to you or surprising?
I think, again, Sabrina, it's like what you said about the women sitting around the table. It's that they were they were open, that some of these conversations seemed to be conversations they were having for the first time or amongst the four of them. I had been planning that I would interview Ira and Max separately as we went along. And it was Sarah who said, I'd quite like to be part of that. I'd like to have this conversation with them. I think it'd be really interesting for the four of us to talk about these questions together. And so it was her that had suggested that. And I thought, okay, that's going to be really interesting. And I think that was wonderful because you do see, again, there's some really funny moments as well.
I was surprised how much I laughed in this documentary. There are very moving moments, emotional moments, but yeah, there's such, and like, I'm assuming that's representative of, who they are as a family unit, right? That kind of spirit with which they see the world. Do you think those conversations, that, with the friends and also with the family, like, do you think that they really, or what impact do you think they had on Sarah, and as she was, mulling over, the steps that she was going to take, or, how she was deciding how she was going to feel even about herself?
I think they had a big impact. And, they took place, those two big conversations probably took place 3 years apart, maybe. When you think of it, because she said she was 2 years post-surgery. So, right? So at different, bookending it in some way at different points. I think that they had a big impact on her, which I'll talk about, but everybody else said that had a big impact on them as well. Right? Because we've been able to reflect now with people who were involved in the film. And you can see from watching the film, from watching Sarah, that even when we're doing interviews where it was just her, you can see she's processing things as we're speaking. Yeah. And so I think that's what she was able to do in those conversations with the groups, is to be able to not have the answer, as you said, not be sure, but to be able to discuss it. And also, if you've ever been in a group or therapy or any, like a group, like, we can't help but think, even though we know better, but think that we're the only one that's experiencing these things, or perhaps we're the only one who's thought about these things.
Yes.
And you get with a group, and it's like, oh my God, okay, so everybody else is struggling with this stuff as well.
Yeah.
Even if it's different in the specificity, there is a universality of thinking about how you are in the world, how people see you, who you can be, how to be more of yourself, all of that.
Yeah. And I love too. So you talk, Sarah's impacted, the people who are present in the conversations are impacted, and your audience is impacted, as well. And as I say, probably building their own friendship brain trusts right now to bring their issues to.
Totally.
I think that's the way to do it. What kind of, I love talking about challenges, especially with a film like this one where it's so beautiful. So I know you overcame the challenges, but what were some of the challenges that you faced, making this film, either before, during, or after? And how did you overcome them?
I think that, I just said probably, the pandemic was one, but, anybody who's made a film over the last 4 years, the that was certainly a big one in my mind, because of it meant that everybody had to stay home. And I was kind of thinking in perhaps more of a conventional, as a new filmmaker, fairly conventional approach to narrative, as in, like 3 acts, and, Sarah was going to come out into the world and then nobody was coming out. And I think I was just patient. So overcoming the challenge of perhaps having some preconceived notions of what this story was going to be. And so instead just being patient and waiting and seeing what happened. I think, other challenges where, the number of people who, like when somebody's telling a story about their own life, there's a lot of people that are in their lives or have been in their lives who might not be in the film, but, photos, history, etc. I think lots of filmmakers probably need to deal with this when people are still alive. And what do you do about, how much do you share? How much do you, include in the film, not including the film, talking to people? I mean, obviously Sarah had to talk to other people that were in her family or friends. And there's also the whole thing about hereditary genetic mutation. I mean, hereditary diseases. And so what does it mean in terms of telling other members of the family and so on when you decide to be public about this? So it was probably more content things in terms of the story. Now, for myself, as a new filmmaker, my challenges were being unsure about certain things. So and learning to trust myself. In spite of being a new filmmaker, I'm not a new human being, right? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, I have a lot of experience, I've been round the block a few times. So I think that often I felt like I'm a friend, and Sarah was going through something hard. And so I often felt like I wanted to, look after Sarah rather than get her in front of the camera. Mm-hmm. And so I think just trying to find a place where I was okay with whatever decision I made. Yeah. If I decided not to film because I needed to give her a cuddle, that was okay. Yeah. It said something about me as a human being as opposed to as a film. Didn't mean that I didn't have that instinct as a filmmaker.
I think as a documentary filmmaker you talked about the importance of relationships, up top, but kind of holding on to your empathy, while you're making a film and, honoring the responsibility, that you felt towards Sarah. I feel like maybe, I don't know if they could even teach that in film school. Yeah. You just had that. I will be asking you lots of questions about your previous lives, but, what were some of the, the transferable skills from your previous, work, previous, adventures, mm-hmm. Activities, that you're like, oh, this actually works in the documentary space as well?
I think probably as a storyteller, I think that although, I wasn't doing, what some people might not see as storytelling, I had been involved in activism, in trying to change the world, and trying to present alternative possibilities of a fairer, more equitable, sustainable, more just world. And that was through bringing people together, through teaching, through writing. And so those things, I recognized that, had probably always been trying to change the dominant narrative. And so there was a real similarity in then moving to documentary filmmaking, because again, I want to disrupt the dominant narrative. I want to make visible marginalized lives. And so lots of those skills have been really useful. Mm-hmm. Other ones that have been very practical have been my experience with writing, grant writing, raising funds.
Yep.
You'll be very aware of what it's like in the documentary space in terms of trying to get support and trying to get funding. And, not all filmmakers are the best writers necessarily, right? I mean, I had that and had lots of experience. So that has been very handy. Perhaps also juggling a lot of different activities and responsibilities and listening, being really interested and genuinely curious about other people's lives and listening to that. I think that, those are some of the skills that have really helped with this new filmmaking endeavor.
Oh, fantastic. Especially, I hear you about those grants, though. It's a very special, specific kind of writing. And yeah, not everybody can do that. So as you mentioned, as we both mentioned a few times, this film has screened, it's riding the festival circuit. And so you have attended some of the screenings, right, at festivals?
Absolutely.
So what kind of feedback, have you received about the film at these screenings, that has touched you, the most deeply?
I think that I've found that a lot of people have been pretty emotional. It's really, really touched them, different pieces of the film, because the film is not just one thing, right? I mean, there's so much complexity. It can be about, Jewish assimilation. It can, it's about health issues. It's about showing up. It's about being seen. It's about family. It's about community. It's about love affairs. It's so many things that it therefore touches a lot of different people in different ways. There have been common themes for sure. I've been struck by people's desire for the community and the support that they see in the film. It's so important in life, in the world, and not everybody has it. So, I'm probably, as a lesbian filmmaker who wants to make these kind of stories visible, it's, in this day and age, I at times have some doubt about, lesbian visibility. Is it really that as important as I think it still is, etc.? I have been really moved by that experience of the number of women who've said that, somebody, when we had our world premiere at DOCSA here, which was absolutely fabulous, because the local family, local filmmaker, it was just an amazing experience. And after we had a great after party, and somebody came up to me and said, it's the first time I've seen my life on screen. Right? And she was, I don't know, late 60s, 70, whatever. And it wasn't just seeing a lesbian. That's not enough, right? We see that. We see plenty of that. But what we don't see, I think, still, are the complexities of those lives, as opposed to just a coming out story or a this or a that, And I think, that was very, very meaningful to me.
Wow. I bet.
Lots of women have decided to go and get tested for the BRCA gene. I mean,
wow.
That is absolutely happening.
But that is incredible. Yeah. I mean, that's, you spoke about your responsibility, that you felt to Sarah, but it also seems like you also have maybe it's even just while the film has been traveling, but a responsibility to the audience, as well. Do you consider yourself to be an activist documentarian, or, that you are not pursuing, wielding? I mean, when we make choices, we're elevating in storytelling, we elevate and amplify, stories that are important to us. We're bringing eyes to a story, right? So there is that can be considered some kind of activism. Do you consider activism to be part of who you are as a documentarian?
It's a great question, and nobody's asked me that before. So it's really interesting. I'm thinking about it. I was very much an activist in my previous life, if you will. And I think when I thought I was going to do this documentary filmmaking, I thought, okay, but I'm not making films about that stuff. Like, so all the social justice stuff, all the violence against women stuff, all the, that work that I did, I thought, I'm not going to make films about that. And yet, I thought, I'm going to I know that I just want to make visible the lives of the women around me, whether they're here or, further away, because I feel great. I'm very grateful that I've had community, that I've built community, that I've been part of. I've mostly been surrounded by women who have tried to change the world. And I don't think we see that enough. And so that's what I want to make visible. And so although perhaps I haven't thought of myself yet as an activist documentarian, I am absolutely making the stories I'm choosing. The choice is very intentional, absolutely. We were recently, we went to London, Ontario, just saying that was London, England, but London, Ontario, the London Lesbian Film Festival. It's been going for 31 years. It's the last one in the country. But there was a young woman there who, not a young woman, no, but somebody else. I don't know, she'd be in her 30s or something like that. But she said, if I had seen more films about lesbian joy, I might have come out earlier. It might have been easier, right? Yeah. And I think, those are the films that I'm going to make, to continue to make, that aren't just, that do make you laugh and make you cry, because that's the nuances, the complexity of our lives. Yeah. So yes, short answer. Well, that was a very long answer. Yes.
I mean, you summed it up beautifully with that, with that, yes. What lessons do you think are present in Sarah's story?
It has to be self-acceptance. And she would say, don't leave it as late as her. But often we do, because it's not until we are more mature that we can really reflect on all of these things. But I think the beauty that there is in fully being yourself and showing up as yourself, I think for sure. And the importance of, being able to talk it out with others.
Yeah. What does Not Quite That tell us about the kind of work that you'll be doing moving forward?
I think that it probably guarantees that the next films, all the films are going to have lesbians or lesbian themes at the centre. Yeah. Absolutely. I would like to think that we'll also see some complexity in them, that although they may have incredible meaning for that specific audience, I think that there'll be universal themes in the films as well. And also, I don't know that this, not quite that necessarily indicates this, but I think they'll be local as well, you know, because of, that's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in the everyday lives of girls and women, you know, and those are the kind of films, those are the stories that I want to continue telling. You know, I recently saw, when we were at the festival, I saw another short film where, you know, it was older lesbians, oral history type thing. And the filmmaker said to a person, and there was 400 or something that they collected these oral histories from, to a person they said, I don't think I have I've done nothing in my life. I don't have an interesting enough story. And then they'd start to tell the story. And of course, everyday lives, it's the ordinary stuff that is most interesting, because everybody's got a story once you dig a bit deeper.
Another thing they probably couldn't teach you in film school either, right? Is that kind of curiosity. Mm-hmm. All right, we're about to, in a moment, we'll be moving into talking a bit about your filmmaker origin story. But before we do, one more question about Not Quite That. Mm-hmm. How did the process of making this film and releasing this film change you, both as a filmmaker and as a human being?
Probably, I've probably learned to let go a lot more of control, or the illusion of control, and of wanting something to be really great. When you're new, I mean, I made that shift from, you know, being a seasoned professional in my own profession to a complete beginner in this. And so it couldn't be great from the beginning. You can't be, whatever that is. And also the nature of film, which I didn't know, the nature of the beast, which is that things go wrong all the time, right? That's just the nature. It doesn't matter if you plan really well. I mean, good planning is good, but that things are always going to go really wrong. And so to let go of that illusion of control and to go with that, and for it to be good enough, and to, I think I really learned something about the power of story. Because I think, you know, I was probably concerned also with how things look and sound, and of course that's really important. It's a visual medium,
right?
But if the story's compelling enough, then that's what's really gonna matter to people. So I've learned to chill out a wee bit, for sure.
That is something that it's good that you've learned early on in your filmmaking career, because otherwise, it'll take a toll on. Mm-hmm. You know, you just have to kind of like accept all the chaos.
Yeah,
just kind of move with it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Ali. Ever since I read this line, I put my hands on my hips. I'm like, okay, explain yourself.
Yes.
So the line from your bio that I at age 53, you went back to school to learn documentary filmmaking. Short sentence, big question.
Right.
What? Why? How did we get here? You know, like what did you do before? And then what compels you, you know, to make that pivot, or leap, or I'm assuming some kind of movement is there, you know, to make that move into the world of filmmaking.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, so my previous work, I was working in healthy cities, healthy communities, you know, community change work. I was, I'm a geographer, people in place. I'm fascinated by that. And I was, you know, as an independent consultant, right? So, you know, working with nonprofits and local government and health authorities, bringing them all together to, you know, make change. And I was quite happy doing what I was doing. But as I got into my 50s, I just was curious. Like that was it. I was curious if there was anything else in me, because I had always done a similar thing. And so I'm like, you read about people who, they're an accountant and they always wanted to be a jazz musician, right? But they just never, something like that.
Yeah.
I didn't have that, drive in me to find something else. So it was a bit of a process, because I was thinking, okay, I'd like to see if there's anything else in me. I need to do something that's challenging. And anyone who knows me knows that won't be like a physical challenge, won't be climbing a mountain or anything.
Same.
Right? Yeah. I thought, the emotional challenge of trying something, of really switching up and trying something different. And I did make a bit of a list.
Okay.
A list.
So can you please tell us some of these other occupations, vocations that were on your list?
Well, I thought maybe like large scale sculpting, which is hilarious because I was never an artist, if you will, right? But I was just thinking, I need to try something different. Maybe something with my hands, something that's so different that will really challenge me to be a beginner to all of those, maybe generate something new in me.
Wow.
Large
scale sculpting,
large
too.
scale,
not little sculpting,
right? And so documentary filmmaking was on the long list.
Yeah.
But the more I thought about it, the more it kind of started, was moving up a bit. Sorry, because I was thinking, okay, it feels like it would still be contributing to perhaps changing the world. I think that still was important to me. But also I'd never had my hands on a camera. And so I thought, that's going to be a challenge, right?
Wow.
Can you do it? Do you have, and I did, I was really lucky that you've probably heard from lots of people, the doc community in Vancouver is really fabulous, really supportive and open. And I have a bit of a history with DOCSA, the Documentary Film Festival, not as a filmmaker, but I was really I'm good friends with one of the founders, and we shared an office on the drive. Even when we were on Commercial Drive, I was doing something entirely different, but they had the office there, and so I helped them out with organizational development and stuff. And through that, I met some people on the board, so I met some filmmakers.
Wow!
Right? And so when it was time to think about documentary film school, or whether I should even do this, I was able to go and meet with some really experienced women in the bigger field and say, what do you think? I don't need another degree. I don't want to go and spend 2 years somewhere, And so came up with, go try this 16-week program in continuing ed at Langara Community College, which most unfortunately does not exist anymore. That continuing ed 16-week thing, which is a shame. So I went to that, and there were 9 of us, the small cohort, and it was all the young ones and me. And they were wonderful, and I loved it. Yeah. It was great. And I had thought that the transferable skills would be, I'd probably could produce or direct. Never thought I'd love being behind the camera.
Wow.
And I do. It was fabulous. I loved it. It was great. The editing, like the teachers who were there, it was so fabulous. And I thought, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to give this a go. And being the age that I was, that, I had some resources to be able to get things started. And, unfortunately, the young ones that I had crewed with, they had to go off and get jobs. Right. And so, because as you know, most documentary filmmakers have other jobs as well.
Yeah. I mean, if a lot of times you have to start shooting before you even have any money lined up, right?
Right, which was the case here. Yeah. So that was how it came to be.
I love how joy is also a big part of your filmmaker origin story as well. I would watch a documentary about you, Ali, frankly. How would you describe your style, your documentary style, as a storyteller?
Mm-hmm. I don't think I'm there yet. So it's interesting. I mean, I think, okay, with the films that I have made, because I have made a couple of short films during when I was making Not Quite That, probably there is that mix of, like, the poignant, like serious stuff, but funny stuff as well. And I think that reflects who I am in the world. I can go deep, but I can also, use humor quite a bit. But I did do a mentorship with filmmaker Andrea Dorfman, who's out in Halifax, about memoir storytelling. And she said, we need to get to a place where we can turn the knob on the TV. Remember those days? You would, but and we know it's the alley channel. Like, what is that? That's the voice you need to find, which I thought was quite interesting. And so I think that has probably still to emerge fully. I'm working on that, but I think they'll always be. I'd like them to be quite slow and meditative and nuanced and have that complexity. And they're going to be about the extraordinary lives of ordinary women. They are,
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Wow, we have covered so much. Oh, only a few questions left. Speaking of which, what are like some of your favorite questions to ask as a documentary filmmaker? Because that is such a big part of the work that documentarians do.
Mm-hmm. It's a huge part. I think I like the second question. And what I mean is the question that you ask after somebody gives you an answer. So perhaps it's the question that takes them a bit deeper. Mm-hmm. I think that, I really enjoy that. I like asking people to reflect on things, like to do their own analysis. Ideally in front of the camera, if you can. So I think it's probably types of questions. Rather than I can't think of a specific one that I would be asking, but questions that would take people a bit deeper and get them to talk about what they think about it or how they feel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I completely hear that. It's like those, you could prepare all the questions that you want, but the questions that are a thought, like that just kind of occur to you while you're having a conversation with somebody, like those are my favorite questions, to ask, because it's like the conversation, it's as a collaboration,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Are there any trends that you're seeing in the documentary realm that you are excited about? Or excited about?
And see, I was thinking, I don't want to be negative. And so I wasn't sure if you were going to say excited about or disturbed by.
Well, that's me changing my question based on you.
Right. I think, of course, we have been seeing a bit of a trend of, it's a bit formulaic in terms of, documentaries as entertainment, right? So, about celebrities or about, or even true crime, or which amazes me that it's entertainment. But it is. Also, somebody had said to us about this film, Not Quite That it's best. It's not just about one thing. And that makes it a bit challenging for distribution, interestingly enough, for education and things, right? Whereas, if you get people in a room together, if they're showing up, they can deal with the complexity.
Yeah.
For sure. So I don't know. I suppose, this, I am excited very genuinely about TELUS Originals, getting into this space. And I think, I was having a look at the streaming platform, I mean, our film is being released on June 13th, and people are going to be able to watch it there. And there's some great films. So different types of support probably for indie filmmakers.
Yeah.
And seeing,
Yeah. And like a focus on local stories as well, that hold up a mirror to, what our neighbor is doing or what our people down the street are doing. I find there's so much beauty in those local Vancouver stories.
And I mean, of course, we are absolutely seeing more diversity in the storytelling and people's experiences. That's great. And I think that's where resources are so important as well.
Yeah.
That's the dog.
River. Dog is piping in.
Totally. I mean, that's where resources and support and so on are so important, so that we get a greater diversity of stories across this incredible country.
Yeah.
I mean, if there's anything I'm excited about is seeing more of those stories.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you're working on at the moment that you are able to tell us about?
Well, I can tell you that I'm working on a short memoir and the very, very beginning of a feature, which will be local, lesbian, etc. But so although I can't talk about the specifics, I think that I will tend to do a memoir and then a bigger feature about other people. I think I've learned that I want to be able to tell some of my story to make sure I keep getting vulnerable and it keeps me honest when I'm trying to tell my stories or ask other women to tell their stories.
Fantastic. Well, I, for one, cannot wait to see what you do next. I guess, and it's my final question of this conversation, and we're going to return to Not Quite That. How would you like people to feel when the end credits are rolling on Not Quite That? Or what kind of conversations would you like to inspire with this film?
I would like people to feel seen. I would like people to be thoughtful, and I'd like people to be inspired to go off and have conversations inside themselves and with their friends.
Beautiful. Well, I, for one, have definitely enjoyed this conversation today. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ali Grant. And thank you for listening to the TELUS Originals Doc Talks and to our guest, Ali Grant. Watch TELUS Originals documentaries at TELUS Optik TV Channel 8 and watch.telusoriginals.com, and follow us at TELUS Originals on Instagram. Doc Talks are a production of TELUS Originals. This episode was produced by Sharon Bradley with technical support by Matt Waterworth. Ken Soy is the production executive for TELUS Originals Doc Talks. Doc Talks are produced on the traditional and unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. The viewpoints expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect those of TELUS.